එදිනෙදා ඔබේ මුළු සිරුරටම රැකවරණයක්. සුදේශී කොඹ සබන්.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50 අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, return to normalcy. President's Media Division announces May 11th for resumption of normalcy in low-risk districts. Under control. Director General of Health Services says Sri Lanka can claim to have achieved control over COVID-19. Rallying call. Sri Lanka marks International Labour Day in lockdown as President calls it an opportunity to showcase to the world the unity, strength and revolutionary spirit of Sri Lanka's workers. Positive policies. International Labour Organization Country Director praises Sri Lanka's health sector and its do not terminate labour policy in the face of COVID-19.
If you kill them off now and they go down under and it's so destitute because they just don't have that working capital.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Friday, the 1st of May 2020.
හැටනමයයි 97ට SMS කර රුපියල් මිලියන 3ක මුල්තැන්ගේ උපකරණ දිනාගෙන අවුරුද්දෙම කුස්සිය ටයිම් සේව් කරගන්න.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm MUTTIAH. Now, today is International Workers' Day, where the efforts, contributions, struggles and gains made by workers and labourers are honoured and celebrated the world over. Usually, a number of rallies are held by major political parties and trade unions on the streets of Colombo on a day like this. However, this year celebrations have been restricted due to the ongoing COVID-19 curfew. Last year, two celebrations were subdued due to the security situation following the Easter Sunday attacks. In his message, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa said that in this time of restriction, he remains confident that the country's COVID-19 battle can be won as past challenges had been overcome hand in hand with the country's working class. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa in his message called on the country's workers to provide encouragement and assistance to those battling to eradicate the pandemic by following the health and safety regulations set down by the government.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa issued an official message commemorating May Day today, stating that International Workers' Day is an opportunity to showcase to the world the unity, strength and revolutionary spirit of the world's working people. The President added that while the working community has lost the opportunity to celebrate May Day as the country battles the COVID-19 pandemic, he remains confident that the determination of the workers to create a better and just society will remain the same. He added that though the working class segment remains the single most directly affected by any and all challenges the country faces, history has proven their resilience and commitment, which is a credit to the country's working class. He noted that the battle against COVID-19 can certainly be won, as, quote, "We had conquered all the difficulties in the past hand in hand with the working class," unquote. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa too released a May Day message, saying that although workers are unable to display their strength and unity this year, there remains another way of doing so, which is by providing the encouragement and assistance of the working population to those battling to eradicate the pandemic by following the rules and regulations set down by the government. The PM added that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought into question the viability of the open economic system embraced by the world and has shown Sri Lankans that it is time to change the policies being followed so far. The message added that the pandemic has also taught the country to place its faith in a unique economic policy and a self-sufficient economy as a solution to the emerging situation. The Prime Minister also called on the people to salute the health sector, the tri-forces and other state sector employees engaged in combating the pandemic.
Now, Sri Lanka's spike in new cases experienced in the past week seems to be slowing down, with only 9 new cases reported today, bringing the total number of active cases under treatment to 510. 18 patients have been discharged after being given the all-clear since yesterday to return to their homes, bringing the country's total recoveries to 157. Meanwhile, Director General of Health Services Dr. Anil Jayasinghe says that the health authorities can actually claim that control over the spread of the virus has been achieved and that the use of an algorithm for carrying out PCR testing has given the health sector the upper hand in the containment fight.
Sri Lanka's COVID-19 cases have seen a gradual slowing down in the 4th, the 5th and 6th weeks since the first case was detected on the 11th of March. However, since then, the 7th and 8th weeks have recorded somewhat of a resurgence, with the highest numbers reported so far. The reason for the sudden spike was mainly due to the exposure of Sri Lanka Navy personnel during roundup operations in the Sudbella area, who were later diagnosed as COVID-19 positive. So far, a total of 273 out of the total cases detected since the 22nd of April up to now are naval personnel and their close associates. This figure highlights the need for more stringent safety measures when dealing with the quarantining of new cases. However, apart from the infected sailors detected at the Navy base in Välisära, only 74 other COVID-19 cases were detected at external quarantine centres and during field inspections in the last 9 days. Among the 16 cases reported yesterday, 9 have been confirmed as naval personnel at the isolated Gamanu Navy base in Välisära. A further 4 patients from this number are residents of Suduvella who were placed in quarantine at the Olivil Quarantine Centre. The remaining 2 patients are a resident of Dabare Mawata in Narayanpita and 1 other detected at another quarantine centre.
මේ අනුව නාවික හමුදා බටයින් ආසාදිත වෙලා හමුවීම තවදුරටත් කෙරෙනවා. නමුත් සංඛ්‍යාව අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා. මොකද සියල්ලම පහේ ක්‍රමක්‍රමයෙන් සොයා ගැනීම නිසා අපි අත්ත වශයෙන්ම පාලනය අතට අරන් ඉන්නවා කිව්වට කමක් නැහැ. මොකද අපි හඹා යන රෝගීන් දැන් විශේෂයෙන්ම බස්නාහිර පළාතේ අපි දැන් හදලා තියෙනවා මේ PCR පරීක්ෂණ කිරීමේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවටම යම්කිසි ඇල්ගොරිතම් එකක්. උදාහරණයක් හැටියට කොළඹ මහනගර සභාවේ මේ බිම් මට්ටමේ වැඩ කරන සියලුම සේවක කණ්ඩායම්වල සාම්පල් විදියට PCR පරීක්ෂණය සඳහා තෝරා ගැනීම කරනවා. ඒ වගේම ඇතැම් විට වෙනත් ආයතන වන්න පුළුවන්. අපිට තේරෙනවා නම් තුමු ත්‍රිරෝධ රත රියදුරන් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. යම්කිසි ජනාකීර්ණ විදියට ජීවත් වෙන උදවිය වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේ නියැදි අරගෙන පරීක්ෂා කිරීම කරනවා. ඉතින් මේ වයින් අපිට ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම විශාල වශයෙන් හමු වෙලා නැහැ. අපි කරන පරීක්ෂණ ප්‍රමාණයට අනුව සුළු සංඛ්‍යාවක් තමයි රෝගීන් හමු වෙන්නේ. ඊයේ දිනේත් ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම PCR පරීක්ෂණ 1397ක් කරනු ලැබුවා. මට 100% කිව නොහැකි. නමුත් මම හිතනවා මේ තත්ත්වය වෙසක් හරහා යයි කියලා.
After the first COVID-19 case was detected on 11th March, further cases were detected among several arrivals from Italy, Germany, the United Kingdom and India. Following this, further infections were reported from many areas, which resulted in 31 virus clusters popping up throughout the country. Meanwhile, DIG Ajit Rohana says that as of today, 27 have been controlled and contained, with authorities now able to lift restrictions in those areas.
පළවෙනි ශ්‍රී ලාංකික කොවිඩ් රෝගියා හොයාගත්තේ මාර්තු 11 වෙනිදා. දැන් එදා ඉඳලා මේ 600 ගාණක් වෙනකල් රෝගීන් බිහිවීම සම්බන්ධව ලෝකේ කොහෙවත් නැති විදිහට ඊශ්‍රායලයේ ඇරෙන්න අපි තමයි මේ බුද්ධි සේවා පදනම් කරගෙන කරේ. වෙන රටවල් කරේ රෝගියෙක් හම්බුනහම ඒ රෝගියා රෝහලට ඇතුළත් කරනවා ප්‍රතිකාර කරනවා. ඔහුගේ අවට ඉන්න සමහර වෙලාවට අයට නිරෝධායනය වෙන්න කියනවා. ගෙදර මිදලා එච්චරයි. නමුත් මේ අය සම්බන්ධ වෙච්ච පළවෙනි රවුමේ කට්ටිය දෙවෙනි රවුම තුන්වෙනි රවුම මෙහෙම කියලා ඒ ගම් පිටින් ලොක්ඩවුන් කරලා මෙහෙම කරේ විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ අපේ රාජ්‍ය බුද්ධි සේවාවේ ඒ වගේම අනිකුත් බුද්ධි සේවාවල දායකත්වය නිසා දැන් මේ වගේ පොකුරු 31කින් තමයි මේ රෝගීන් හැම කෙනෙක්ම මේ 600 ගාණක්ම හමු වුනේ. මේ ක්ලස්ටර්ස් වලින් දැන් 27ක්ම අකර්මණ්‍යයි. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒවා දැන් විවෘත වෙලා තියෙනවා රෝගීන් බිහි වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒතකොට තවත් පොකුරු 4කිනුත් පොකුරු 3ක්ම අකර්මණ්‍ය වෙමින් පවතිනවා. ඉතින් මේක ඊටාම සාර්ථක තත්වයක් මේ අපේ බුද්ධි සේවා එක්ක සිදු කරපු සෞඛ්‍ය සේවා බලධාරීන්ගේ සෞඛ්‍ය ක්ෂේත්‍රයේ අයගේ ඒ වගේම අනිකුත් අපි හැමදෙනාගේම උත්සාහයේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් හැටියට තමයි මේ පොකුරු අකර්මණ්‍ය වෙන්නේ. ඒක අපිට එක්තරා මට්ටමකින් සතුටු වෙන්න පුළුවන් කාරණයක්.
Meanwhile, following the detection of 4 new cases at the Olivil Quarantine Centre, officers of the Jaila police station and public health inspectors visited their homes at Paris, Peranamawata and Kalupalama areas in Jaila. The family members of the infected individuals were subsequently placed under self-quarantine and PCR tests are set to be carried out on them tomorrow. Further, biological samples were also obtained from residents of MUTTIAH Road in Colombo yesterday, and following PCR tests carried out, 2 individuals had tested positive for the virus. Following further investigations, it had transpired that one of the patients was employed at a restaurant located at the weekly fair in Narayanpita. Public health inspectors then visited the location and ordered all shops at the fair to be shut down and subjected a total of 50 employees to PCR tests. The premises was then placed under isolation. Meanwhile, the second patient from MUTTIAH Road was an employee of a private company in Mattakulya. The company premises was then sealed off and employees were prevented from entering or leaving the building. The 45 employees of the company were subjected to PCR tests today. Meanwhile, following the detection of a COVID-19 positive patient in the Botulugoda export processing zone, 21 factories have been closed down. Kalutara district health officials say that this was done after an employee at a canteen in the zone had tested positive. Meanwhile, with 9 new COVID-19 patients detected today, the total has risen to 674. With the recovery and discharge from hospital of a further 18 patients yesterday, Sri Lanka's recoveries jumped to 157. This was the highest number of recoveries reported in a single day so far. Out of these were 7 from the National Institute of Infectious Diseases, 7 more from the LANKAN base hospital, and 4 from the Iranavila Treatment Centre. The epidemiology unit reports that 510 more patients currently remain under treatment at 7 treatment centres throughout the island. Meanwhile, with most countries across the world still maintaining travel restrictions as well as airport closures, the government to date has managed to repatriate a total of 1,065 Sri Lankan overseas students from South Asian countries since 24th April. These include students from Punjab, Mumbai, Coimbatore, Bangalore, New Delhi and Kolkata, as well as Karachi, Lahore, Kathmandu and Dhaka. In addition to students, it also includes government and military personnel who have completed overseas studies and training programs. Further, Sri Lankan Airlines has announced that Sri Lankan students in the UK and Australia should register with the Sri Lankan High Commissions in their respective countries in anticipation of their repatriation.
Now, the government today declared that daily lives of the people will be returned to normalcy from Monday, the 11th onwards. This includes the Western Province and the Puttlam district. The government says that state and private institutions must function from the 11th onwards and that they should adhere to the health protocols put in place by the government. Heads of state institutions are left to decide on the cadre to be called for work, while the time to open private sector establishments is set at 10 a.m. Meanwhile, buses and railways will only provide transportation to people setting off for employment. The government urges the rest of the people to stay at home in support of the battle against COVID-19. It insists that people should only venture outdoors to purchase essential goods and for essential matters such as purchasing of medicines and essential goods. In the meantime, with the exception of Colombo, Kalutara, Gampa and Puttlam, the curfew for the rest of the 21 districts will be in effect from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. the next day until Wednesday the 6th. The curfew in those districts will be imposed at 8 p.m. on Wednesday the 6th, will be in effect until 5 a.m. on Monday the 11th of May. Now, the curfew in 21 low-risk districts was reimposed at 8 p.m. last night and remained in place throughout the day today. Police in the meantime stated that higher amounts of arrests were made from the Western Province and the Puttlam district with regard to curfew violators.
The curfew reimposed at 8 p.m. last night remained in place throughout the day in all districts. According to the latest statement from the President's Media Division, the curfew will remain in effect in 21 districts until 5 a.m. on the 6th of May. So far, 43,012 people have been apprehended and 11,142 vehicles seized due to curfew violations in operations carried out since the 20th of March.
විශේෂයෙන්ම පසුගිය පැය 24ක කාලය තුල 709 දෙනෙක් අත්අඩංගුවට ගෙන තිබෙනවා ඇදිරි නීතිය කඩකල පුද්ගලයන්. ඒ වගේම වාහන 215ක් පොලිස් භාරයට ගෙන තිබෙනවා. නමුත් මේ 709 අත්අඩංගුවට ගෙන තිබෙන්නේ විශේෂයෙන්ම බස්නාහිර පළාත පුත්තලම දිස්ත්‍රික්කය ආශ්‍රිතව ඒ වගේම රාත්‍රී කාලයට අනිකුත් දිස්ත්‍රික්ක ආශ්‍රිතව. ඒ කියන්නේ සාපේක්ෂව වැඩිපුර බස්නාහිර පළාත වගේම පුත්තලම දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ ඇදිරි නීති කඩ කරන්නන් මේ වන විට වර්ධනයක් තිබෙන බව පේනවා.
At a time when the police has urged the public to stay indoors and avoid gatherings, officers of the Police Anti-Corruption Unit of the Hatton Division, along with police officers of the Ginigathena Police Station, arrested 8 people, including the chairman of the NAWALAPITIYA Urban Council and a NAWALAPITIYA organizer of the Samagi Janabalawegya, Sasanka Sampath Sanjeeva, for engaging in gambling inside a tourist hotel in Ginigathena during curfew hours. The arrest was made by officers based on information received. It was also revealed that 12 other people had escaped. Police seized 62,000 rupees in cash, card packs and 2 vehicles, including the jeep belonging to the Urban Council chairman. The suspects were remanded until the 6th of May after being produced before the Hatton magistrate today. Upon a request made by the police, the court ordered the 8 suspects, in addition to the UC chairman, to be subjected to PCR tests. Elsewhere in Kalutara, the Unresolved Crime Investigation Unit of the Kalutara Division arrested 3 suspects for possessing a kilogram of heroin and narcotic pills worth Rs 20,000 at a house in Madawala. The arrest was made based on a tip-off received by the unit. In the meantime, police have stated that they have launched an investigation into videos circulating on social media that show minors using video messaging platforms to issue threats of violence.
සමාජ මාධ්‍ය ජාලා හරහා කුඩා ළමයින් අපරාධ කිරීමේ ප්‍රවණතාවක් දක්වන නැත්නම් කුඩා ළමයින් අපරාධ කරුවන් බවට ප්‍රකාශයට පත් කරන ඒ වගේම කුඩා ළමයින් අපරාධ වලට නැඹුරුතාවක් දක්වන යම් වීඩියෝ දර්ශන කීපයක් කුමාරු වෙන බවට වාර්තා වී තිබෙනවා. මේ වීඩියෝ දර්ශන පිළිබඳව පරීක්ෂණ ආරම්භ කර තිබෙනවා. මේ වීඩියෝ දර්ශන යොමු කරපු අන්තර්ජාලයට මුදා හැරි පුද්ගලයන් ඒ වගේම ඒවා බෙදා හරින ලද නැත්නම් ෂෙයා කරන ලද පුද්ගලයන් පිළිබඳව විමර්ශන ආරම්භ කර තිබෙනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම අපරාධ නීතිය යටතේ වරදක් සිදු කර තිබෙනවා නම් එවැනි අවස්ථාවකදී අවුරුදු 10ක කාලයක් දක්වා බන්ධනාගාරගත කිරීමේ හැකියාවක් අධිකරණයකට තිබෙනවා.
Meanwhile, a grade 11 student of Rajasinghe National School Kotikavatta, along with another student of CWW Kannagara Vidyalaya in Borella, have developed a mechanism to help officers on duty check curfew passes, driving licenses and identity cards of passengers while maintaining social distance at checkpoints. The handing over of the machine to Head of Traffic Police DIG AdaDerana worked off today at the police headquarters.
We will see you shortly after this break. Stay tuned.
නිෂ්පාදිත දිනය කවදත් අලුත් වටවල තේ අරගන්න.
වටවල තේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ තේ එක.
Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, the International Labour Organization believes that entities must try their level best to steer clear from laying off employees, since it will better serve in the long run. Speaking to Indivari Amwat on our current affairs program at Hyde Park, International Labour Organization's country director for Sri Lanka, SINGH explained that by not terminating employment, businesses will be better placed to resume their operations, and it will outweigh the costs involved in starting from scratch. She also urged dialogue with labour market actors in the revival process, with safety and health measures also encouraged, especially targeting particularly vulnerable workers.
COVID-19 was not a pandemic that any country or any individual envisaged. What does the ILO suggest as certain approaches that governments should take in order for policies or response measures to be as effective as possible and to be implemented as swiftly as possible?
We have a four-pronged approach to what we think should be the solutions when it comes to at least the labor and employment side of things. Certainly focus, starting with the health, which many seem to be doing quite a lot on, but really stimulating the economy and trying to create employment. Very active fiscal policies are needed, that also accommodative monetary policies to make sure that the lending, the financial support is there to create employment that's conducive for business to pick up and for work to be generated, including investments in the health sector. You'll have seen that countries that had invested a lot in the health sector actually have fared quite a bit better than countries that had not, including Sri Lanka, which has quite a high level compared to many other countries in the South Asia region. The health sector here is quite strong. So you see those kind of returns on investment, but if there's further investment to be made, the health sector is probably a very good one to invest in. The second area is on enterprises, because they've really been the engine of most economies, including here in Sri Lanka. They account for billions of jobs around the world. We really have to protect those jobs and income, so we have to find a way, like I said earlier, I think, to keep the payrolls going, to have working capital available, and to create a situation that when things are in the new normal and can operate, they can operate quickly, and they can adapt quickly, and they can repurpose quickly, and they can do what needs to happen quickly. If you kill them off now and they go down under and it's so destitute because they just don't have that working capital, and I must say here in Sri Lanka, I've noticed that the policy of the government has been, do not terminate. Whatever you do, do not terminate. Keep it going. We know it's difficult payroll-wise, but this discussion is very important to come up with a proper formula of how you can keep people employed even if they're not physically showing up to work at this point in time. And this is where also this issue of social dialogue I mentioned is very important, to really engage the views of the labor market actors, which is employers, workers, and government together hand in hand. They are part of the solution. They know exactly what sectors and what areas are hardest hit. Many of them have been doing surveys looking at exactly how many months can you buffer yourself, how long will you be able to pay workers. They know exactly the issues and where the relief would be needed and should be best targeted for this next 3 3-month period, for example, and maybe the next 6 months, but building back better. I think the fourth area is really on this protecting workers side. We have got to invest in their health. We have to make sure they're working in safe environments because they're really essential. So these safety and health measures are extremely important, and targeting especially vulnerable workers. So for example, migrant workers, women workers, people with disabilities that are working, they're not able to access.
How do we talk about the informal sector? How do we look at them here? They're not on a regular payroll. Even small startups that had just invested and begun working on their projects. Micro enterprises, as you mentioned, that you are really concerned about.
It's a daunting task, but it's doable. And I think there are some good things here in Sri Lanka. For example, the Department of Labor does contain information about enterprises that are even 15 employees and below. They've been, some of them contributing to EPF, etc. That coupled with the district level administrative data also which exists about which enterprises might have been affected, I think is a very rapid way in which we can actually ascertain who have been hit hard.
Moving on with other stories, the Ministry of Buddha Sasana has announced a Vesak week which starts from the 4th and ends on the 8th. The Vesak festival, which is the most important festival for the Buddhist faithful, is to fall on the 7th of this month. However, the usual vibrant Vesak celebrations will remain muted as social distancing remains the theme this year amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. With that, the Buddhist clergy have requested the faithful to celebrate at home in a more meaningful manner.
The Vesak full moon POYA day is celebrated by Buddhist devotees to commemorate the birth, the enlightenment and the passing of Lord Buddha. The full moon POYA day is to fall on the 7th of this month. However, due to the prevailing virus situation, the public will not get the opportunity to celebrate the festival in the usual fashion. Owing to prevailing lockdown and health protocols put in place to curb the spread of the virus, pandals and mega Vesak lantern displays will not be seen during this year's Vesak celebrations. With that being the case, the government has once more urged people to celebrate this year's festival by staying indoors and also by avoiding public gatherings. The state Vesak festival for this year will be worked off at Temple Tree's premises on the 6th of May under the patronage of the chief prelates of the TRI-SECTS.
ආමිකව අරලිගහ මන්දිරයේදී ගරු අගමැතිතුමාගේ ප්‍රධානත්වයෙන් පැයක තියෙනවා වැඩසටහනක්. එතෙන්දී මට ඊයේ දැනුම් දුන්නා ක්‍රමත්ත කාරණේ අපේ උපරිම 12 දෙනෙකුට සීමා කරන්නයි කියලා සහභාගීත්වය.
වෙසක් පුන් පොහොය දින ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන සීල භාවනා වැඩසටහන. අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වන්නේ නිවස කේන්ද්‍ර කරගත්ත දාන සීල භාවනා වැඩසටහනක් තමයි මෙවර ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නේ වෙසක් දිනය පදනම් කරගෙන. ඒ නිසා අපේ රටේ වැඩි ජනතාවට වැඩි පිරිසකට පුළුවන් සීල් සමාදන් වෙන්න පුළුවන් තමන්ගේ නිවසේ මේ ශාලයේ ඉඳලම. වෙසක් සතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවා 4 වෙනිදා සිට 8 වෙනිදා දක්වා.
With regard to this year's Vesak celebration, the chief prelates of the TRI-SECTS have issued a statement. It requests the public to stay indoors and engage in religious observances geared to commemorate Vesak. Furthermore, the TRI-SECTS urge people not to organize any events which involve large crowds, both inside and outside temples.
බෞද්ධ පින්නතුන් පූජනීය ස්ථානවලට ඒක රාශි වීමෙන් තොරව තම නිවෙස්වල රැඳී සිටීමෙන් ඒ සැරසිලි කටයුතු බෞද්ධ ධර්මානුකූලව ඒ සිදු කරන වතාවත් ආදී පූජා චාරිත්‍ර ඉෂ්ට කිරීම වගේම තමන්ගේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති ගරුකව කටයුතු කිරීම ආදී සිද්ධ කරන හැටියට අපේ බෞද්ධ ජනතාවගෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
මේ අවුරුද්දේ වෙසක් දිනය අපට පුළුවන් රටේ පවතින තත්ත්වය උඩ තමන්ගේ නිවසේ සිට තමයි වෙසක් උත්සවය අපිට අර්ථවත් කරගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ. හැම කෙනෙක්ම ගෙවල් වල ඉන්න නිසා මා හිතනවා සැබෑවටම වෙසක් අර්ථවත් කරගන්න පුළුවන්.
The Ministry of Health meanwhile has issued a series of guidelines to be followed by the people during the Vesak festival to protect the people from the spread of the COVID-19 virus in the country. Accordingly, the Ministry of Health states that it is appropriate to organize Pirit and Dhamma sermons using loudspeakers while maintaining social distancing. The Ministry of Health has also requested the public to abstain from holding Vesak zones, almsgivings and pandals that gather large crowds.
සිංහල දමිළ අවුරුද්ද ඔබ නිවසට වී සමරුවා සේම මේ බෞද්ධ ආගමික කටයුත්තත් තමන්ගේ නිවස තුළම සිදු කරන ලෙස මේ වෙසක් සමයත් COVID-19 මර්ධනය කර ගැනීමට රටක ජනතාවක් විදියට එකට එකතු වෙලා අධිෂ්ඨානශීලීව මේ වෙසක් සමයේදීත් කටයුතු කරන ලෙස අපි ඔබෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
President Secretary Dr. P.B. Jayasundara has said that the President has been perplexed at the thought of former Minister of Finance Mangala SAMARAWEERA'S unwillingness to move into an election despite being an ardent believer in the neoliberal socio-economic model. The comment came by way of a letter sent to SAMARAWEERA by Dr. Jayasundara in response to a letter sent by the former MP to the President. In it, the President's Secretary also listed various factual errors contained within SAMARAWEERA'S letter.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa responded to a letter sent to him on the 28th of April by former Member of Parliament and once Minister of Finance Mangala Samaraweera through his secretary yesterday. The letter sent by Secretary to the President, Dr. P.B. Jayasundara, noted that the letter sent to the President was compiled based on a number of misinformation. The Secretary mentioned that the President had acknowledged the letter with deep regret as to receive such a letter from a former Finance Minister. Dr. Jayasundara listed the errors that had been made in the former parliamentarian's letter that was titled Request for the Resummoning of Parliament to Conditionally Resolve Crises and to Approve Public Expenditure. In his reply, he pointed out that if the appropriation bill was not passed at the time of the dissolution of Parliament, then under Article 150-3 of the Constitution, the President is empowered to meet the expenses via a vote on account bill for up to 3 months of convening the new Parliament. The Secretary further noted that the President regrets the unwillingness of the former Finance Minister, an ardent believer in the neoliberal socio-economic model, to allow the people to assert their democratic right through elections.
We will see you shortly. Bear with us.
කොරෝනා වෛරසය පැතිරීම වළක්වන්න සබන් යොදා දෑත් සෝදන්න.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka has introduced a system that automatically halts trading and closes the market for the day if the S&P SL20 index drops by 10%. The circuit breaker mechanism will take effect from the date the market reopens and remain in force until further notice. The first circuit breaker in the three-tiered structure will come into effect with a market halt of 30 minutes in the event the S&P SL20 index drops by 5% after commencement of trading at the CSE. Having recommenced trading after the cooling off period of 30 minutes following the S&P SL drop of 5%, if the S&P SL index drops again by another 2.5%, a market halt will be imposed for another 30 minutes. Thirdly, upon recommencing trading subsequent to cooling off period of 30 minutes following the S&P SL20 drop of 2.5%, which equates to a collective drop by 7.5%, if the S&P SL20 index drops by a further 2.5%, trading will be halted and the market shall be closed for the day. The SEC says that it has deemed it necessary to amend the current methodology by introducing a three-tiered circuit breaker structure, having taken into consideration the prevailing market conditions. It notes that a three-tiered circuit breaker structure is introduced in order to strengthen the capital market and ensure that precautionary measures are in place to eradicate distortion in the S&P SL20 index by providing a layered approach. The SEC has directed the CSE to implement the three-tiered circuit breaker structure from the date the market reopens and says that it shall remain in force until further notice. Meanwhile, the SEC has also granted several relief measures to licensed companies, taking into consideration the constraints and administrative challenges faced by those entities in complying with certain regulatory requirements due to the coronavirus outbreak. Specific regulatory flexibility offered by the Securities and Exchange Commission include extensions of the time for the licensed or registered entities to submit reports to the SEC, the due date for submission of the unaudited financial statements, the compliance of officers' reports, and the unit trust returns for the months of March, April and May 2020 are extended by a period of 3 weeks from the stipulated timeframe. The due date for submissions of audited financial statements is extended by a period of 2 months from the stipulated timeframe for financial years ending 31st of December 2019 and 31st of March 2020 respectively. The submission of annual and interim reports for unit trust funds are extended by a period of 2 months from the stipulated timeframe. However, the unit trust managing companies are encouraged to issue the aforesaid reports earlier where possible. What's more, a deferment of a year for the SEC's annual licensing or registration fees for the year 2020 on the core regulated activity of all licensed or registered entities will also be granted upon a request being made. Mandatory continuous professional development requirement to transfer all investment advisors from the previous qualification framework to the new qualification framework has been extended by 6 months until the 30th of June 2021. All investment advisors who are required to obtain a minimum of 2 continuous professional development seminar credits for the renewal of license of their respective stockbroker or dealer company, where such date of renewal falls within March to September 2020, will be granted an extension of 6 months from the date of the due date for renewal in order to meet the CPD requirement. Now, world stocks pulled back further today on grim US economic data, mixed company results, and President Donald Trump's threat to impose new tariffs on China over the coronavirus crisis. MSCI's index of global stocks fell 0.5% after a tumble late yesterday broke a 6-day winning streak for the index. London-listed stocks fell as data showed the UK housing market was grinding to a halt, with the FTSE 100 down 2.2%, wiping out much of the strong gains earlier in the week. In Asia, with many markets closed, the benchmark NIKKEI index fell 2.8%, with declines led by chip-making firms, while Australian shares fell 5%, their most in 5 weeks. The negative sentiment was set by comments from Trump on yesterday that he was concerned about China's role in the origin and spread of the novel coronavirus, and that his hard-fought trade deal with China was now of secondary importance to the pandemic. He threatened new tariffs on Beijing as his administration crafted retaliatory measures over the outbreak. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.